Welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Always a pleasure.
Today we're going to be tackling a question that I think has probably crossed all of our minds at some point.
Oh, yeah.
And that is, why do so many people feel anxious and inadequate in today's world? To explore this, we are turning to the work of Karen Horney. She was a psychoanalyst who had some bold critiques of traditional Freudian theory back in the 1930s.
Yeah.
And we're going to be looking at excerpts from her book, New Ways in Psychoanalysis.
That's right. And what's really fascinating is how relevant her ideas still are.
Oh, absolutely.
Even today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Freud, he's so famous for his focus on instincts, especially the libido, right? This like primal sexual energy that he believed drives so much of our behavior.
There's like the underlying current to everything.
Yeah. And he even interpreted things like a child's attachment to their mother through this lens of the Oedipus complex.
Right.
Suggesting it's rooted in these unconscious sexual desires.
Which can sound...
Now, this one might sound a bit strange.
Yeah, a bit strange at first.
But bear with us.
Yeah.
It's one of his most controversial ideas and one that Horney really challenged.
For sure. One of the big ones.
So how did Horney see things differently?
Well, Horney argued that Freud was overlooking the massive influence of culture and society.
Okay.
She felt that things like affection and power dynamics, even personality traits, can stem from sources that have nothing to do with sex.
So it's not all about our primal urges.
Not just that.
Our environment plays a huge role.
Exactly. For example, imagine a child clinging to their mother.
Okay.
Freud might see this as an Oedipal complex. But Horney suggests it could simply be about anxiety and the need for security, especially in a world that can feel hostile or unpredictable.
Totally. If you feel unsafe, wouldn't you cling to whoever offers the most protection?
Precisely. And this brings us to a key difference in their views on the Oedipus complex itself.
Okay.
Freud considered it like a universal stage of development.
Right. Everyone goes through this.
Yeah. But Horney, using anthropological observations, argued it's not universal and is heavily influenced by family dynamics within a specific culture.
So what we might assume is human nature could actually be shaped by the society we live in.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big deal.
It is.
Yeah.
And this difference in perspective becomes even more striking when we look at Freud's concept of penis envy.
Okay, this one is definitely controversial.
So a big one.
Even today, just to clarify for our listeners, Freud believed that women, because they don't have a penis, develop this envy of men, and that this envy shapes their psychology.
Almost as if he was defining women by what they lacked, rather than by their own unique attributes and experiences.
I can see why Horney took issue with that.
Oh, she did.
Yeah.
Horney argued that Freud completely ignored the cultural factors that contribute to women's feelings of inadequacy. It's not about anatomy, it's about power and opportunity.
So rather than envying men themselves, women might be desiring the qualities and privileges associated with being male.
Right.
In a given culture.
In a given culture.
Okay. Yeah. That's a much more nuanced way of looking at it.
It is.
And it makes you think, in what areas of your own life have you felt held back? Maybe it's not envy you're feeling, but a desire for a fairer playing field.
Exactly.
This is where those aha moments really hit.
Right.
It's about recognizing how societal forces shape our perceptions and desires.
Absolutely. And this leads us to another area where Horney challenged Freud, the concept of masochism.
Freud connected femininity and masochism, an idea that another psychoanalyst, Helene Deutsch, even took further, calling masochism the elemental power in female psychology.
Yeah, basically suggesting that women were somehow predisposed to submissiveness and suffering.
Yeah, that's troubling, to say the least.
It is.
How did Horney respond to that?
Well, she completely rejected the idea that masochism is inherently feminine. She argued that it develops as a response to conflict and the need for safety, regardless of gender.
Interesting.
It's like trying to find a way to feel safe, even if it means accepting pain or subjugation.
So someone who grows up feeling constantly threatened or powerless might develop masochistic tendencies as a coping mechanism.
Exactly. And this highlights Horney's crucial point.
Okay.
The interplay between culture and neurosis, something she felt Freud didn't give enough weight to.
Okay. I'm really curious to hear more about that.
Yeah.
How did she see culture shaping our mental health?
Well, Horney argued that societal structures, like competitiveness, inequality, and the pressure to achieve, can breed anxiety and neurosis.
Wow.
She believed these external pressures, rather than just internal drives, play a huge role.
She was writing this back in the 1930s.
I know.
I can only imagine what she would say about today's pressure cooker of a world, with social media amplifying those anxieties tenfold.
I think she might say, "I told you so." But more seriously, she pointed out that things like the pressure to conform and appear unselfish could lead people to suppress their genuine desires and needs.
Right.
Ultimately contributing to neurotic development.
That really resonates with me.
Yeah.
And she talks about this tyranny of the shoulds.
Yes.
Right? This constant bombardment of messages about how we should live, how we should feel, how we should achieve.
Right. It's exhausting.
It can feel overwhelming, like we're constantly trying to live up to these impossible standards.
That's a perfect example of what she was talking about.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've talked about Horney's critiques of Freud's ideas on libido, the Oedipus complex, penis envy masochism, even the role of culture in shaping mental health.
Big topics.
Where do we go from here?
Well, in her book, Horney goes on to offer her own perspectives on the ego anxiety and the superego.
Okay.
And those lead to some fascinating implications for therapy.
I'm definitely ready to hear more about that. It feels like we've just scratched the surface.
Oh, yeah, we're just getting started. Yeah. Let's dive into Horney's take on the ego.
Okay.
Remember how Freud described it as this weak mediator, constantly struggling to balance the id, those primal urges, and the superego, the internalized voice of authority?
Yeah, it's like the ego is caught in this never-ending tug of war.
Exactly.
Trying to keep everything in check.
But Horney saw the ego differently.
Oh, okay.
She felt it was more fluid, more influenced by our environment than Freud gave it credit for.
Okay.
It wasn't inherently weak, but could be strengthened and developed over time.
So instead of just managing our impulses, we can actually cultivate a stronger sense of self.
It is.
That's a more empowering way to look at it.
It is, and this shift in perspective leads to a different understanding of anxiety as well.
Okay.
Freud primarily saw it as fear, the fear of being overwhelmed by our instincts.
But Horney connected anxiety to something deeper.
Right. She saw it as stemming from a sense of helplessness in a world that can feel hostile and overwhelming. Remember all those pressures we discussed?
Yeah.
The need to achieve the competition, the fear of not measuring up.
Right.
These external factors contribute to anxiety, not just our internal struggles.
So it's not just our biology.
Right.
It's the world we live in that makes us anxious.
Exact.
That makes a lot of sense.
And it opens up new possibilities for addressing anxiety.
Okay.
Maybe it's not just about controlling our inner turmoil, but about finding ways to navigate a challenging world more effectively.
I like that. Okay, we're ready to tackle the superego.
All right.
It always conjures this image of a strict judge constantly scrutinizing my every move.
Well, Freud did paint a pretty intense picture of it.
Yeah.
It's that voice of authority, often representing our parents' values and societal expectations.
Right.
And it can be incredibly harsh.
He even connected it to the death instinct.
Yeah.
Suggesting it's fueled by inward-turned aggression, leading to self-punishing behaviors like excessive guilt and self-criticism.
Right.
That's pretty heavy stuff.
It is, but Horney felt that Freud was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle.
Wow.
The very real external pressures that drive this neurotic striving for perfection.
Okay.
It's not just an internal tyrant, it's the culture we live in, constantly demanding more, setting unrealistic standards.
It's that tyranny of the shoulds we talked about earlier.
Right.
And I think it's even more relevant today with social media constantly showing us these seemingly perfect lives.
Exactly. Horney argued that this striving for perfection is often a way to cope with anxiety, a way to maintain control in a world that feels chaotic.
Yeah.
Instead of a purely internal drive, it's a response to external pressures.
So it's about adapting, but maybe in a way that ultimately hurts us more than it helps.
Right.
This constant need to be perfect can be exhausting and lead to a fear of failure and an inability to accept our flaws.
And that's when it becomes problematic.
Oh, yeah.
Horney believed this relentless pursuit of perfection can make us lose touch with who we really are. We become so focused on who we should be that we lose sight of our true selves.
That's a powerful insight. So we've explored how Horney's views on the ego anxiety and the superego differ from Freud's. They paint a picture of the psyche that's less driven by instinct and more shaped by social and cultural forces.
Right.
How did this influence her approach to therapy?
That's a great question. Remember how Freud saw the analyst as a neutral observer,
Yes.
like an archaeologist carefully excavating the patient's past.
Yeah, this detached figure, letting the patient's unconscious conflicts come to the surface.
Yeah.
That makes sense given his emphasis on unearthing those early childhood experiences.
Right.
But Horney had a different take on the therapist's role, right?
Yes. She favored a more active and engaged approach.
Okay.
Instead of just interpreting, the therapist should be a participant,
Okay.
helping the patient understand and challenge those neurotic patterns.
I see.
Think more like a guide than an archaeologist.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
It fits with her view of the ego as something that can be strengthened and developed.
Right.
So therapy isn't just about uncovering unconscious material. It's about empowering the patient to make different choices, break free from those self-defeating patterns.
You got it. Horney believed in the power of conscious decision-making. Therapy should help patients see the real moral issues hiding beneath their defenses. It's about recognizing when you're living inauthentically and making choices aligned with your true values.
That sounds like a much more present-focused approach,
It is.
empowering the patient to create a different future instead of dwelling on the past.
You're picking up what Horney was putting down.
I'm trying.
This difference highlights a fundamental shift in understanding neurosis itself.
Okay.
Freud, with his focus on instincts, saw it as stemming from these unresolved childhood conflicts.
Right.
But Horney, emphasizing the impact of social and cultural forces, saw neurosis as something constantly being shaped and reinforced by our current environment.
So while understanding the past is important, the real work happens in the present. That's where you learn to recognize and challenge those patterns,
Right.
keeping you stuck.
Right.
So it's about breaking free and creating a more authentic and fulfilling life.
It is.
This all ties back to our original question. Why are so many people struggling with anxiety and inadequacy in today's world?
I think Horney gives us some powerful answers.
Yeah.
We're not just slaves to our instincts or doomed to repeat the past. We have the capacity to change, grow, and create a different future.
That's a message of hope,
It is.
especially in these times.
It is, but it also leaves us with a big question.
Okay.
If social and cultural forces are so influential in shaping our psychology, what does that mean for how we understand and treat mental health in the modern world?
It makes you wonder how much of what we consider normal
Right.
or abnormal is just a reflection of the society we live in.
It does. It challenges us to think critically about the messages we receive, about how we should be living and feeling.
Right.
Are they supporting our mental health, or are they making us feel anxious and inadequate?
And if we acknowledge culture's influence, what does that mean for treatment?
Right.
Do we focus solely on individual therapy, or do we need to address the larger societal structures contributing to these issues?
Horney grappled with that herself. She believed therapy should address both individual conflicts and help patients understand and challenge the societal forces affecting their well-being.
So it's like a two-pronged approach. We need individual support to help people navigate a sometimes toxic culture,
Right.
and we need societal change to create a healthier environment for everyone.
That's the idea, empowering individuals while working towards a more just and equitable society that supports mental well-being for all.
So what does this mean for you listening right now?
Yeah.
If Horney's ideas resonate, take a moment to consider how those societal and cultural forces are showing up in your own life. What messages are you receiving about how you should be living?
Right.
Are they serving you or feelings of anxiety, inadequacy, or self-doubt?
And if you're struggling, remember that you're not alone. Resources are available both for individual support and for advocating for broader societal change.
Absolutely.
It's about creating a life that feels authentic and fulfilling for yourself and the world around you.
Well said. That wraps up our deep dive into Karen Horney and new ways in psychoanalysis. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time.